Hey y'all, welcome to part 2 of my Christmas in July series. Today we're going to be talking about something that's equal parts exciting and potentially rage-inducing, paint filling your engraves. Now I know this isn't technically a Christmas video, but I wanted to show you some techniques you can use to seriously level up your holiday game. Think custom ornaments, name signs, gift tags, stocking tags. All of these can be polished up by using the right paint fill technique. So whether you are prepping for markets or making some killer gifts, this video is going to be handy. There are a million ways to paint fill and about 987 ways to mess it up. So today we're going to be testing 6 different methods, both on wood and acrylic, side by side, so you don't have to waste time, materials, or lose your sanity. Let's get started. I've gone ahead and prepped most of the materials and engraved them with the specific method we're going to be using to paint fill so we don't lose track. For both the wood and the acrylic, you are going to mask it, engrave it like normal, and then you want to use compressed air to spray off any particles that may be remaining, especially on the acrylic. Then you're going to apply a hefty coat of lacquer. Lacquer, not spray poly, not clear enamel, lacquer. Trust me on this one, ask me how I know. You'll want the lacquer to fully cure before applying any paint, with one exception which we'll cover later. Now, let's just pretend that I spelled lacquer correctly on all of these engraves, okay? Okay. Lightburn, if you're listening, you need spell check. Method 1, sponge and paint. We're starting off strong with the classic mask it, seal it, and dab it on with the sponge. A classic throwback to our preschool art projects. For this method, once your lacquer has fully cured, you want to grab your sponge and your paint and literally just lop the paint on there. So I prefer these SOS sponges. They're green and textured on one side and yellow and soft on the other. And the best part about these sponges is you can cut them into smaller pieces and use just the right size for your project. Now these sponges can be found at most grocery stores and online, so I'll leave a link in the description. Now this method works with both acrylic and latex paints, and you'll want to ensure full coverage and an even coat as you go. Since paint dries quickly, you can always apply a second coat if you need to. Let it fully cure, then peel off the masking, revealing a crisp, clean paint fill. If you get paint on the acrylic in areas where you didn't intend to, it's very easy to clean with either a baby wipe or this handy dandy plastic razor blade, which I highly recommend. Link is in the description. Method 2, paint pens. This method is similar to the sponge and paint method, but we're swapping out the sponge for paint pens. Finer tips give you better control and are great for detail. And let's be honest, who doesn't love to just zen out and color just like our carefree childhood days? For this method, once your lacquer has fully cured, you'll grab your paint pens and literally just color in the engrave. I've got a fine tipped paint marker. We're going to give it a good shake. And then you want to prime the pen so the ink is flowing. And you just press down on the tip until you start to see ink. We've got some ink coming into the tip. Come on, focus. But it's not fully saturated yet. There we go. All right, and now we're ready to start coloring. Method 3, Sharpies. This is very similar to the paint pen method, but we're going to use Sharpies. But this is a truly permanent option, especially on acrylic. Now what you need to know is that regular Sharpies can actually rub off of acrylic, so you want to make sure you're using oil-based Sharpies. Now this does mean that the color options are going to be limited. So just like with the paint pens, you're going to just color in the engrave. All right, we've got our Sharpie. We're just going to give it a good shake. And the tip of the Sharpie is much bigger than the paint pen, so this should go a lot faster. Method 4, powder coating. All right, now we're gonna get a little bit fancy with some powder coating. If you're not familiar with powder coating, it's the process of taking dry colored powder, getting it to bond to metal, and baking it to create a durable coating. Think colored tumblers, for example. Well, we're not dealing with metal, and we're certainly not going to bake wood or acrylic in the oven, but we are going to use our laser to bake the powder coating into the engraved area. I've seen a couple other makers use this process, and I wanted to test the results. Links to their videos will be in the description. Now, I know some of you are going to ask the same question I did. Can you mix two different colors of dry powder to get another color? So for example, yellow powder coating and blue powder coating to make green. And the answer to that is no. Powder coating does not mix like liquid paints do. So you can mix the powders, but you're going to end up with a speckled or a blended effect rather than a truly mixed color like you would with liquid paints. Okay, for the powder coating, I've gone ahead and done the engrave, and the next thing I'm going to do is spoon on some of the powder and then use the squeegee, the plastic part, not the fabric part, to get an even coat of the powder into the engrave. And I think I'm actually going to do two colors on this one. So I'm going to mask off the area where I don't want powder coating on this first round. And then we will take off the masking, mask the other area, and then do a second color on the second row. So let's get started. Oh, one thing, make sure you turn off your external air. So I'm actually going to unplug this. You do not want air blowing powder coat all over your laser. Trust me. Okay, so I'm not going to drag my air compressor over here to blow off the dust created from the engrave on the acrylic, but I am going to use this little doggy toothbrush, and I'm going to gently brush over the engrave to remove some of that dust. If you don't have any of these doggy toothbrushes, they are great. There's a small head and a larger head. This one's kind of dirty, but they are great for just getting into those nooks and crannies on any kind of engrave you need to clean off. You really want to make sure you use a respirator while you are working with powder coating. You do not want to inhale this fine dust. You really don't need a whole lot of this stuff. You just need a little bit, especially for something this small. And that's actually way too much. So we're going to take the squeegee and go back and forth a couple of times, making sure we've gotten it into all of the crevices. And then you can do a second coat on most powder coatings, not all of them. So I'm actually going to bring this off to the side in case we need to do a second coat. Okay, now we're just going to, I'm actually using a wet paper towel to wipe off the red. I don't want any cross contamination with the second color I'm putting in. So I want to make sure I get all of the excess powder coat off. A little green, little red and greens, so that we can legitimately say that part of this video is related to Christmas. Ooh, I'm excited about this one. Now don't forget to turn your air back on if you are doing a cut layer. So you know how I said you can't mix powder coating colors? Well, we're gonna give it a try. I'm going to mix up some white and red, which of course should make pink, and we're going to see how it looks when we laser it. And we don't need much, so I'm just doing about that much. And you definitely want to either use a second spoon or clean your spoon in between uses, because you don't want to contaminate your containers of powder coating. About the same amount. I'm just going to mix this with a popsicle stick and see what we get. I'm actually going to do a little bit more white and see if we can get more of a pinky color. Now I know it's not actually mixing, but I still want it to look more pinky. I think that's a pretty solid pink color. Oh shoot, I forgot to turn off the air. Why didn't y'all remind me? This is why you leave extra powder coating sitting there for when you make mistakes like this. That looks pretty pink to me. What do you guys think? I think this would be great for... Really? The air compressor just went off. I think this would be great for baby milestone markers, closet dividers, Christmas ornaments, all sorts of things. I think this whole you can't mix powder coats is a hoax. Method 5, spray paint. Now I only recommend using spray paint to fill your engrave if it's a small project, it requires minimal fill, and it's acrylic. So you're going to cover all of the areas you don't want painted, especially around the edges, with blue tape. Then spray paint the engrave. You want to let it fully cure before peeling off your masking. I've used this method before for the price tags I use at markets, and it's worked out really well. Method 6, cheat. Finally, the last method is to cheat. Okay, so I know this isn't paint filled, but it does give you a similar look, but without all the mess. So for this one, you want to purchase either 2 or 3 layered acrylic and engrave on your normal acrylic engrave settings. No masking, no sealing, and no crying in the garage at midnight because your paint fill is not turning out the way you expected. It's just clean, crisp, and color contrasted perfection. Pro tip, I actually turn off my external air when I'm doing the engrave layer on two-toned acrylic because I want to avoid getting any of that top coat into my engraved area. Now, a note of caution, if you turn off your air, you want to be very careful about your lens. Not having air coming through the nozzle can actually damage your lens, so you want to keep an eye on it and clean it mid-engrave if you need to. Everything's dry, so let's get everything unmasked and we will look at the results. Okay, y'all, I just recorded this whole segment in slow-mo, so I have to do it again. So here we go for round 2. Okay, the results are in, and I think it's pretty safe to say that I do not recommend using wood as the material if you plan to paint, fill, and engrave. Now, it can be done, and we do have some mediocre results on some of the methods, but it's not really something that I would feel comfortable giving to a customer. Now, there is one exception, and that is the powder coating. It performed flawlessly on wood, but there is potentially a sizable investment when it comes to powder coating if you need a wide variety of colors. So I'm going to bring you in. We're going to look at the wood and the acrylic together side by side so you can see the results, and we're going to go over some pros and cons of each method. Now, when I am referring to pros and cons, I'm specifically referring to acrylic. That is the material I recommend if you plan to paint, fill, and engrave, with the exception of powder coating, which I already mentioned we got flawless results. So let's go ahead and look at the results side by side. This is method 1. We got great results on the acrylic, good color saturation, an even coat of paint, and no smudging. Now the wood, we got terrible results. We had a lot of paint bleeding, especially up here, and you can actually see some of the lacquer that bled through the masking. So now let's cover pros and cons. Pros, endless color possibilities, great color saturation, and easy to find materials. Cons of this method, it's not great for the finer details. It can get messy or blotchy if it's over applied, and sponges are basically paint wasting goblins. This is method 2, paint pens. Again, flawless results on the acrylic, no bleeding. And then we come over to the paint pens. These were, I would consider, mediocre results. So I think with some sanding, you might be able to get off some of this bleeding. So this is an option. Definitely much better results on the acrylic. Pros of the paint pen method: a wide variety of color options, precise control for those detailed engraves, and it's minimal mess. Cons of the paint fill method are it's super time consuming, especially if you have a large area you need to fill. Paint pens can dry out quickly or they can clog, and some pens don't really bond all that well to acrylic. This is method 3, the Sharpie method. Again, great results on the acrylic. Now you will see some bleeding here. That is my fault. When I was using this tool to take off the little bits of masking, Right, it actually drug some of the ink. Now, remember when I told you this is a permanent bond? I cannot get this off with a baby wipe. So when I say that oil-based Sharpies are permanent on acrylic, I mean it. Now, again, mediocre results on the wood. You can see some of the lacquer that has gone through the masking. And then here, actually the masking came off when I was blowing it off with the air compressor. So that's why this A is completely opaque. But again, I think some of this can be cleaned up with a sander. Pros of the Sharpie method. So it's a permanent fill, especially on acrylic. It's quicker to fill since the tip of the Sharpie is bigger than the paint pen, and it's minimal mess. Cons of the Sharpie method are extremely limited color selection. It's still a time-consuming method, especially for larger engraves. And while this is a pro, it's also a con. Oil-based Sharpies are permanent once they are applied to acrylic. Method 4 is powder coating. So we'll take a look at the acrylic first. Great results. And then the exact same results on the wood. So this is a great method for filling engraves on wood. Now, the pros of powder coating are you get vibrant professional level results. There's virtually endless color possibilities. It can be used on both acrylic and wood. And a bonus, you can get food safe powder coating to use on charcuterie boards and cutting boards. Now, some cons of this method: it can be pricey if you want a wide variety of colors. You will have to purchase each of those colors individually. There's also a learning curve to using powder coating and getting the settings correct on your laser. And then finally, the durability is somewhat questionable, especially on things like cutting boards. Now, I recently attempted this method on some charcuterie boards for a wholesale order that I had. And since these were going to a resort as part of their amenity package, I did some rigorous testing on these boards to see if the powder coating was durable enough for an industrial dishwasher and the continuous use at a resort. And I'm sad to say that it didn't work as well as I had hoped. And after my testing, there was some chipping of the powder coating. So I don't recommend it for things that are going to have heavy use, but if you're using it on something that requires limited handling, I think you'll be just fine. And here's our little mixed powder experiment. So this was the red and white powder. I don't know that it really looks all that speckled, in my opinion. I think it's a pretty solid pink color. Same thing on the wood, great results. Now I'm curious, if we used two drastically different colors like blue and yellow, I wonder if it would turn out looking green or if it would just look like a bunch of blue and yellow specks. Maybe we'll try that on the next one. Method 5 is the spray paint method. Again, the acrylic is flawless. This is the wood without any lacquer first, so completely unusable. And then actually some really promising results on the spray paint method when you put lacquer on the wood. We did have some bleeding of the lacquer through the masking, but if you plan to put a clear coat on the finished product, I actually think this might be a viable method. Of course, we do have a couple spots where there was some bleeding, but I think this is probably the best result on the wood. Pros of the spray paint method: it's quick and it's easy, provides great coverage, and you get a wide variety of color options. Cons of the spray paint method: it does require additional masking to cover the areas you don't want painted. I only recommend it for small, quick projects, and there is a risk of bleeding if the masking is not adhered really well. The last method is to cheat. Obviously, this doesn't work on wood, so there's no side-by-side comparison, but this is a great option, especially if you're only using one color of fill. Pros of the acrylic method: it's a one-step process. You put it on the laser, you engrave it, you take it off, and you're done. You get crisp detail and fast, repeatable results. Cons of this method are the acrylic can be a bit pricey. There are limited color combinations and you are limited to certain sizes of acrylic, and obviously it doesn't work on wood. Okay, so what did we learn? Painting is a great beginner-friendly option. Powder coating is a bit of a commitment and probably a little bit of an investment. And sometimes cheating with acrylic is simply the smartest move. Let me know in the comments which method you use or which one almost made you give up paint filling forever. If you found this video helpful, poke that like button, poke that subscribe button, and stay tuned for more helpful laser tutorials. I'll see you on the next one. And you can actually cut... Apply a hefty coat of lacquer. There goes my script. Oh yeah. I actually need to mention that. Let's go ahead and get B-roll of that. Where is it? La 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 la. Should I re-record this without the thing? It's kind of keeping my hair back though. Method 1. What is method 1? I'm filming. Psst, I'm filming. This is gonna make it into the blooper reel. Pros of the spray paint.